Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of CAOverwatch. I am your host, as always, Spencer, and with me most
Chris.
of the time is Chris. And we have a very special guest for you guys today. We've been trying to get on the show for a while, so I'm super happy that I can finally announce the one and only general manager for the Toronto Defiant, Jay. So, Jay, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm just out here in Korea right now with my team camp.
Yeah. So, again, so we're just gonna sort of hop right into it. If you can just give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself and sort of how you got into esports, became a general manager, and then maybe give a little bit of breakdown for those who don't know at home, but what the day-to-day activities of like a general manager sort of entail.
So let's see, I was 20 years ago. I used to be a player, but not in Overwatch. Obviously, I was
Yeah.
I was a competitive fighting gamer.
Okay. Cool.
And that was yeah. But it wasn't like the best time to be in esports at the time. I mean, fighting
Yeah.
games at the time wasn't definitely not esports. It's still pretty grassroots right now, and it was way more back then.
Mm-hmm.
I so that, like I really didn't see like a future in it. So I after like a couple years of got out and did a lot of other jobs. I was in the army for about nearly 10, and when I was getting out of the army, my friend who works at Blizzard asked me the closed beta Overwatch. Sure, I got a lot more, and so I did. In there, I got to become friends with a lot of people that eventually became pro players in Overwatch. And this one team this one player I was very close to, Pure, he asked me to manage the original called Final Go McCree, and it was Pure, Papa Smurf, Kozin, Flame, who's
Hmm.
an Outlaws,
Yeah.
Steel, who's a CS:GO player, and then they asked me if I could help them find an org to represent them. That's together we had a team deck, talked to a couple of orgs, talked to the Splice owner at the time, Marty. Splice, they liked our team deck, and then they signed us. So Splice itself was in Overwatch very early on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually that team became Splice, and there was a couple iterations of that team. It went from, a lot of the core dropped out. Then there was a bunch of Europeans like Graceful, Twitty, and Ada. And then that iteration disappeared, and they like absorbed half of Kungarna. That was what Baby Bay, I Remix, Michael, and Motorius, and it still had Pure and Graceful on it. And then eventually, though, this is like, I guess they call it like the dark period Overwatch. So it's before Overwatch League, but then after closed beta. So it's like a big stint where there was nothing really going on.
Yeah.
Blizzard hadn't announced the Overwatch League yet, but there was no real events going on. There was the occasional like the Gosu Gamers stuff and the other things that were going, the Alienware monthly melees, but pretty much it was very little activity and very little viewership, really. So the org decided to drop out of Overwatch at the time.
Okay.
However, at the time, they asked me, even though they got rid of Overwatch, they asked me to stay with the org, and then I went from being the manager of Overwatch, I became the assistant GM of Splice, and then the head of all North American teams, and then also partnerships. And then organically from there, while I was with Splice, eventually Splice partnered up with Overactive Media to acquire the Toronto Overwatch League spot. And then after that happened, they just talked to them. I said, look, I would rather be single game focused, and agreed that because of my experience in Overwatch and just knowing the scene and the community, that I should just become the Overwatch League GM. So among probably a lot of esports, I probably have one of the longest like management careers. I've been in esports for about managing for 5 years. So managing for about 5 years straight now.
Wow, that's a pretty long time. There's a lot of management considering, especially like Overwatch, League is pretty young, but esports in general, is pretty as well. Now, is I guess with especially Overwatch team management being, I guess, how do I put it, like a lot more official now, do you find that your responsibilities as a GM has changed from when you were managing the teams back then to managing teams now?
So it's a little different. So managing teams back then, early on in Splice, I had less support. So generally, I was both the team manager, because team management and general management are two very different things.
Yeah.
But I had handled all the day to day of the team as well as all more the GM admin stuff at the same time. So both on a logistics and HR scale.
Mm-hmm.
Now, eventually, once we got bought by Overactive Media, they they themselves have started to build out a large structure themselves as an organization.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually they get to a certain point. Like now, like compared to like my first year of the Overwatch League, like so just season two, to now, like season two, I had to deal with a lot more admin.
Mm-hmm.
Now a lot of my admin work has been moved over to HR, and instead I've absorbed a lot more logistics. Before there was another person that was our logistics person,
Mm-hmm.
but now all the GMs deal more with the logistics of the team and then less with
Mm-hmm.
the HR of the team. So it's like while I still do a lot of the admin, the admin work has kind of moved away from being pure admin to more like logistics. So that has to deal with scheduling everyone's flights, figure out. I also own all the GMs in Overactive because we do have three franchises. So we have Overwatch League, the Toronto Defiant, and we have the CDL, which is Toronto Ultra, and
Yeah.
we have the LEC team, which is Mad Lions.
Yeah.
So the three GMs basically, we all have our own budgets that we create.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then it gets refined through a process with Overactive Media. And eventually, we do have a set budget that the board of directors approves for us. We work within the confines of that budget, and we basically have to own that budget. Is in fact that we tried not to go over the budget throughout the year. There's a lot involved with that, and building. For my experience is a little different than the CDL and the
Mm-hmm.
LEC GMs, but I deal a lot with helping to build out the team. Um, so a lot of the HR, also the HR responsibilities. I interviewed like maybe 30 plus people for the head coach role before I settled
Wow.
on Felix.
Wow. Yeah.
Um, he was among our final four, and then those final four got interviewed by our VP of teams, and then they got moved over to the senior VP. Like they had after like I took down those original 32, 30 something, like 32 down to four, and went from that four, and they went further on in the interview process until we narrowed it down to Felix. Um, and then after that happens, me and Felix work together to help plot out the team. A lot of the team
Mm-hmm.
was already sort of, we had like a lot of players already we wanted as our first picks. But at the same time, you also have to have your second, your third pick, and your fourth pick because
Yeah.
you never know what's
Mm-hmm.
going to happen. Because if you don't have your backups in place, then you just end up running around when you get sort of if you get outmaneuvered. Because
Yeah.
during the off season is generally tends to be the busiest time for
Mm-hmm.
GMs.
Yeah.
Because during the season, really all we're doing is helping maintain, making sure everything runs smoothly as best as we can.
Yeah.
But in between the two seasons, we are the most stressed out because
Yeah.
that's usually when we're doing re-signing negotiations if we have those, um, figuring out budgets for the new season. Then we have to deal with player contracts and negotiating player contracts with both players. Not because not all players are represented. I recommend all players should get representation,
Yeah.
but generally for the most part, I think everyone on our team has an agent, and then not only do we talk to the agency, and then some generally very rarely is a player not represented,
Mm-hmm.
um, but at the same time also you have to negotiate terms to try to get players. You have to realize at the same time, as if you're going to be a good GM, you have to realize what other teams are planning, and you have to either
Mm-hmm.
try to outmaneuver them for certain players. You at the same time you don't want to go crazy by like doing massive bids and then blowing all your budget on one player,
Exactly.
and then because there's no point in getting one superstar and then having like 5 people that came from like tier 4 basically.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
No,
like,
I know what you mean.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if it was a Widow meta, you could just have
Well,
one
yeah,
Widow pops up.
well,
but-
exactly. Depending on the meta changes, right? Like that's, yeah, no, I completely agree with how you put it. And we're definitely going to get into sort of the off season and how crazy the 2019 off season was for you, in a bit, because that's something I'm super interested in talking about. But I was wondering if you just wanted to start off by talking first about sort of like the experience you had in 2019 and sort of some of the lessons you learned from the Defiant overall, and like how you selected the roster and sort of where things went from there.
So with 2019, it was kind of unfortunate because we had a
Mhm.
very limited amount of time to
Mhm.
develop, to actually also look at scout number one,
Yeah.
to pick out a team, also to pick out a head coach. So we didn't find out we had an Overwatch League spot until pretty much free agency had already started, and then we had to scramble.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
So like once that part happened and we had to go like full steam ahead, I was basically in a race to try to find a head coach, and I had
Yeah.
interviewed a couple. The most promising had been Bishop for us, just because we went by his past
Mhm.
Yeah.
results. However, at the same time, we did have some reservations because he didn't have a great, like, he was there, he helped develop the team for London Spitfire, but then he
Mhm.
didn't stay with the team. So
Ex-
that
yeah.
obviously that was very worrying for us.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it's terrible to go on pure rumors about a player because you can never know, right? It's
Yeah.
because everything
Yeah.
could be hearsay, not a player, but about a coach.
Yeah.
Because you could hear good
Either way
things
it
and
works.
bad things about a coach, but you don't really know until something's actually verified about somebody.
Mhm.
So, you know, at the time he was our best bet to going into season 2, and we went with that.
Okay.
And then obviously he built out the coaches he wanted, and we wanted to do a Korea boot camp, and we used that boot camp actually. That's where we actually was our trials.
Mhm.
So that very
Oh.
much differed from our 2020 setup. So 2019's boot camp was over a month long. It was almost 2 months long, and that's when we actually did our trials. But
Interesting.
because we
Cool.
started pretty late in the season, we were we were pretty behind on trying to get a lot of the people we wanted. So they did have the coachings did have picks that they wanted, but then
Yeah.
a lot of these picks that we went after them, and then things would fall through, or we would spend like weeks, talking to these 3 players, and then find out, hey, we've decided to sign with somebody else,
Yeah.
and it's just just one way or another. Because a lot of times, it's not so much how much you're willing to pay a player, but a player also wants to see what team you've already developed.
Exactly.
So if you have nothing, no foundation there, and you're developing from scratch, and they see that, hey, I'm going to join this team, but I have doubts about who else is going to join this team with me.
Yeah.
Or that player can go for another team that already has most of their roster set, or a good chunk of their roster set. It's a little different. So
Yeah, then I'm sure just like how, people get hyped over teams who do well, if you have a team like Bitfire or another team from the first inaugural season playing really well, like they want to go there because they want to have a little bit of that clout, right?
yeah. And then for us, during the season, we did have a lot of unfortunate things happen to us.
Yeah.
Um,
Because that's what I was gonna
we
say.
did
Obviously, it
have-
started so well with stage 1, right? And then it kind of
yeah.
went less well after that.
Well, it wasn't good that at the start of stage 2, we lost one of our key players.
Stellar. No,
Yeah.
absolutely. I completely
Yes.
agree.
So the timing of that really hurt us, because when you have 1 week before the start of stage 2 and you just have a
Oof.
player retiring,
Yeah.
we have no replacements for him. Because people can say, why didn't you just play Asher? Number one, Asher hadn't scrimmed for like 3 months.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you can't just throw Asher. He himself wasn't enjoying the game anymore. That's why he was the second person to retire from our team.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So he wasn't really motivated. a lot of it had to do. It's not Ash's fault at all. It's actually
Oh.
we worried about him a lot because he was unsure at the end of season 1 what he wanted to do with his life, and because video gaming had been such a core part of his life, he still wanted to try it out. But then as the season progressed, he realized that he didn't have the same passion he had for it anymore, and that's why he eventually retired. And it was we all supported him in that decision. Now, the only fortunate thing with Stellar was that he decided to retire on us with very little warning, and I have nothing. It didn't upset me or anything.
Yeah.
It's just because you have to roll with the punches basically.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If stuff happens, you just have to basically accept it, and you have to do your best to move on. What people also don't realize is when that suddenly happens, you have a very limited window to find someone because you have to play, right? And then, so I am 37. We found him because one of our players just watched his stream and said, "Hey, this guy has good aim. He's in Canada. He speaks Korean and English. Maybe we can get him really quickly." So
Yeah.
That's what we did. We just got, and that's why he was the fastest person to ever make it into the Overwatch
Speedrunner,
League.
yeah.
Yeah, he
always
was a
wondered about
speedrunner.
But there must have been, I mean, obviously I know there's the Canadian element to it, there's the bilingual element to it, and you're right, like he would know from SQC stream, and there was hype surrounding him. But was there anybody else during that time? Because I agree with you. I think that really was a turning point for this team during the season, trying to replace Stellar. Was there anyone else sort of at that point that was on your radar that you really looked at, or was it sort of just like someone was like, "I'm 37," you watched the VOD review of his Contenders game, and you're like, "Yep, that's my guy."
No, definitely not. So
Yeah.
there was plenty of people we would have taken, but they already had to have a visa. If they have no visa, we can't take them. So we're an all-Korean team. It's an all-Korean team. You can only use a Korean player. We can't. We couldn't throw
stuff.
I didn't even think
Yeah,
about
we
that.
really could not. Yeah, people are thinking, why don't you just get somebody else and try? Like, who are we going to trial? You can't trial Korean players because their visas won't be ready for another 2 months.
Yeah.
So what do you do? So we kind of were left, between a rock and a hard place. We had to make a sudden decision, and we went with IM37, who is a very talented player. It's just he had no experience.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Mechanically,
when
you're
a
right.
player has, mechanically he is a great player, but then he has zero experience playing in real scrims. He has zero experience. He has very little tier 2 experience, let alone tier 1 experience. Has none of that, and so he basically, and at the same time, he had to play Brig, which he had never done before.
Completely.
So
that was
our
the thing.
coaches-
It's like, I was gonna say it was like you got this like hit scan specialist. So one of his knocks was he didn't have a lot of experience, but on top of that, it was like, hey, here's Brigitte. We want you to play that.
Yeah, so we had to teach him how to play Brigitte.
Yeah.
Because, and the thing is, people can say, why don't you just make him play Zarya, which we tried.
Yeah,
Now,
but
the
also
thing
Ivy
is,
was doing really well too, right? Like you don't want to throw
Yeah.
Ivy off his game.
Yeah. And the thing is, what people have to realize, being a good hit scan player does not mean you're a good Zarya player.
For sure.
There's so many examples of Season 2.
No, absolutely.
Great hit scan players that are absolutely trash Zaryas. So, all right?
I know what you mean, yeah.
I think God Ivy was at least in the first stage, not one of them. I remember seeing his stats. He was like one of the
Ivy had a good
for stage 1. He's like top 3 like damage for 10 minutes. I was like, wow, Ivy's doing great.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it has nothing. Being a good Zarya during GOATs had nothing to do with your aim. It had,
Bubble
it all
management,
had to do with,
positioning.
bubble management. Yeah, there's so much more involved than just aim, and so that's why there was so many terrible Zaryas that came from hit scan players that just, that those teams just did terribly. IM37 was not a good Zarya for us. He could be a very good tracer, but it was a GOATs meta,
Exactly,
so we had to teach him how to play. We had to teach him how to play Brigitte. So this just sort of spiraled with our team because we went from a very good stage 1, losing one of our key players, not having the time to train up another player, and also having a player that had very little experience. So then progressively the team would do worse. And then because of it, players that were already on the team, their morale shot down. And so even if they did well stage 1, we were going to do terribly stage 2 because, it sort of like was like a domino effect where, yeah, we just lost a player because we're teaching this player. Our scrims are going to go worse. Our matches are going to go worse, and the players get a lot more, just unhappy about the entire situation.
Mm-hmm.
And then at certain point, like, our off tank wanted to leave because, well, he either wanted to leave or we had to make drastic changes to the roster.
Yeah.
And one of the hardest things for us was that we couldn't find teams willing to sell us players during the season.
Interesting.
We tried
Yeah.
with many teams, and during the season, most teams were not willing to part with anybody. So we were stuck because we couldn't use Korea Contenders players because the visas would take too long.
Mm-hmm.
None of the Korean players in Overwatch League were available because the teams didn't want to let them go. Even if they were benched, it could be players that were benched for 2 stages. We just couldn't get anybody. Nobody were willing to sell players. So
interesting. Yeah.
we were. So
that kind of makes sense because, like, you're anticipating a meta change. Maybe 2-2s come in. You don't know if this bench person is gonna maybe like come off the bench and be a main player.
Yeah. So most teams were just held on to their players the entire time, even if they weren't going to use them, just because they knew possible meta changes could change the course of how their team would look.
Yeah. So is this one of the reasons that why you sort of just decided to go mixed roster? Because that was another thing that I thought was another turning point, was sort of the slow introduction of the Western-speaking players to the already established Korean-speaking roster. Was it sort of just like eventually you knew a change had to happen and you couldn't get Korean Contenders players, so you looked at Montreal Rebellion and said, "Here we go"?
So we were eventually a lot of it had to do with the fact that the Rebellion was destroying the Defiant and scrims. So that wasn't a good look.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, for sure.
Yeah. So because the Rebellion kept beating on the Defiant and scrims for a long time, that didn't help.
Yeah, no, I could, especially if you're a Montreal Rebellion player, right? You're in tier 2. You're like, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah, and a lot of the Rebellion. Well, so not the first iteration of Rebellion, but when they got Gods and Sharik, is when the team like turned around and they actually they were a lot better than us, and it wasn't. It had nothing to do with individual mechanical skill, because in Goats is probably one of the most teamwork oriented metas ever.
Exactly.
And they just had better teamwork than we did. They had players that would trust each other, would listen to each other's plans, and because we had so many people that we had so much low morale on the Defiant, you just couldn't get anything going because nobody would really. The effort wasn't there. It was like maybe a 70% effort most of the time for the team, and it was not much we could do. We tried, sports psychologists. We had from Overactive. We had one of our things was we had performance development coach come in and everything, but just nothing would help really. So, it got to a point when players just didn't want to play with each other. So we decided, hey, you know what? There had been a plan to eventually transition in English speaking into the roster at some point. Yeah. But we accelerated that plan by at least a year. Because Now, then we also faced the issue with that we brought in the 2 key elements that that helped with the a lot of the issues on Rebellion, but now they're on Defiant, and their main issue now is there's massive language barriers.
Yeah, for sure.
So, so even though we're doing English classes and we had a team translator and our head coach was bilingual, the issues were massive. Like we would have, our off tank trying to plan stuff in game, and 2/3 of the team have no idea what he's saying half the time. So and then
for sure, and obviously it's great that you have a bilingual coach and all this stuff and the English classes, but learning a language is super hard, right? That's an unrealistic expectation on top of scrimming, on top of all these other sort of stuff that they have to go through. So no, I understand that would be super difficult.
And also that's the one thing, like you can have your pre-planned stuff, but like the one thing that would affect is spontaneity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hurt spontaneity in that type of way. So that totally makes sense.
because the thing is, you can have pre-planned comps, and then you can have comps to switch to when the enemy has comps, or just like plans.
Yeah,
But the
exactly.
thing is, you don't have. There's no in-game discussion because they don't really understand each other,
Yeah,
and that stuff that is very vital. Like just and
absolutely.
it was very unfortunate for us that things turned out that way, and then
Mhm.
we decided at some point, like let's just go more Western, which we did. We were like, let's just take more players in from the rebellion,
Yeah.
and
Mm-hmm.
the only issue we had during this time with adding more players from the rebellion was that the meta wasn't very good for how we were set up. Like 1-3-1 was not very good for how the team make going.
Yeah.
So like, well, I mean 2-3-1, which so the whole like using what was it 1-3-2? Yeah, the whole triple DPS setup,
Yeah.
because we really couldn't get that coordinated because we had two DPS that were English speaking
Yeah.
and one that only spoke Korean.
Yeah.
So they couldn't coordinate things very well. So because of the language barriers there, so
Yeah. No. Totally
that was
makes sense.
unfortunate too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. So yeah, that's good transition. Like I want to now kind of like look into more forward looking for our new roster setup and going into 2020. So I guess in terms of your plays that you made in this off season, acquiring people like Beast Halo, Nevix, Short for Agilities, for these acquisitions, I guess for me, because I tank, so I like to talk about tanks.
Yeah.
What did you see in like Beast Halo and Nevix that really like made you want to acquire them?
Yeah, because you said earlier that like the number one thing was like sorry, I cut you off, Chris, but just that you really look for like proven players and sort of history on the stage, and obviously with most sort of Beast Halo, he's sort of unproven in that situation.
So with Nevix, we picked him because he was probably one of the most talented off tanks you could get that also wasn't a starter. So his main thing is like he's always wanted he wants to be a starter, and he's talented enough to be a starter, but at the same time he's on a team with Choyobin, who
not much you can do, right?
who arguably was the single best off tank last
exactly
season.
Yeah.
Now so while Nevix is incredibly talented and he's super flexible, he can play almost everything. It just sucked for him because of his situation. The fact that he had to play a sub to quite possibly the best off tank in the game. So we definitely wanted him as soon as he entered free agency. Now with Beast Halo, I think just goes by the name Beast now, but
sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean people have to get used to that.
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
The thing is, we knew mechanically he was very gifted. He was very young. Also, he was only 19.
Yeah.
The thing is, he didn't get to play a lot near the end of the time in Fusion University because all of just language. It's just easier because the team ran like 4 Koreans or 5 Koreans and like 1 Westerner at some point. Yeah, it was like only Snillo was the only English-speaking player at that point. So, just for ease of language, Fusion University decided to go just all Korean-speaking pretty much. Snillo's just like so Beast didn't get to play near the end, but he was proven because he actually was one of the few people that has been to a LAN and won on a LAN because Fusion University did win LAN. When this is before Contenders finals became only online. He actually went with the team and won on a LAN, and that's actually a big deal. If you can go to the grand finals of anything and be in a LAN and then win there, like he had experience winning in that situation. Number 2, he's extremely coachable and he's young, so that was a big deal for us.
Yeah, something you can build around for sure.
Yeah, and then you have a fact that you have Nevix, who's who's a very experienced veteran, and so, they were both hungry too. So Nevix had been benched for a while to Choyobin, and Beast Halo, he was so close to entering Overwatch League last season. Just for it to get taken away, because the funny thing is when we scrimmed Chengdu Hunters last year, Beast Halo was in those scrims against us.
Oh really? That's super cool. So
I
assume he performed well then. You kind of made a note of it.
Yeah, so like we could see him scrimming on their side. With Silk Thread at the time, but obviously Silk Thread decided to retire, and there's no more translator for him. So a lot of things fell through for him, but
that's unfortunate.
That's really good setup. That is a really good because I'm thinking, Nevix and Spencer said this a ton of times. People talk about how Nevix really helped Choyob and practice them and like helped him also like kind of get to that point. So he seems kind of like a very good mentor to like a younger beast, and if he has that kind of coachable sense, and especially almost like a budget winning mentality. Like once again, Spencer comments on this a lot. Like having a person who's won some sort of like I guess a form of a grand final is really good, and it really adds that X factor. And if maybe it wasn't in Overwatch League, but if it was like a different LAN and like contenders, then that's great.
Yeah, and even with Nevix, I think that like I always joke that for all we know, we have the second best off tank in the league, right? It's exactly he was behind Choyob, and I think that's a lot of pressure to put on him. But I do have high expectations. But there's got to be something said for the intangibles that he's bringing. I've heard nothing but positive things in terms of how he is as a teammate, and he was a part of the team that won the grand finals. Like, there's got to be some sort of lessons that you can take from that you can like implement into a brand new roster that was just created.
Yeah, and then Nevix was very instrumental in their playoff run as well, and he scrimmed all the time with them. Like there was a secondary team for
the
and primary team for Shock, but and Nevix's I guess iteration of the scrim team would just do as well, or if not better, than the primary team. So it's not like he had all that experience. He has 2 years of Overwatch League experience. He's been to the grand finals. He helped them through playoffs and all this stuff. So he's a veteran player. While Beast has been engaged in Overwatch, just in tier 2, but in a very probably the best Western contenders team of all time. So, he has that experience. He also has the experience of playing on mixed rosters, clearly. Yeah. So he's very open-minded and everything. So
yeah, and like I said, he's 19, so that's just cool. Like he's improving. You know what I mean? That's what I love about and some of the other players, like Agilities, which we're gonna get to shortly. I like that. I like the fact that you take a chance on somebody who you can help, like you said, put coaching into and help build around, and you hope that he's just going to improve along with your team. So that sort of covers the tanks. So let's just move right on to the other, the two Canadian DPS players. So obviously the huge signing that broke the Defiant fan base, if you will, on Discord and Reddit and whatnot was the official signing of Surefour. And then we can get to maybe the Agility's Kareem situation in a bit, because I wanted to talk specifically to you about that. But, what was it like getting Surefour, and was he like number one on your priority list, and how did that sort of come to be?
I would say Surefour was pretty high on our priority list, because there was never a thing where ownership said you have to have Canadians. That was the thing.
Sure.
I guess there's assumptions because we got Canadians. But,
and you're Canadian,
and we happen to be a Canadian team.
Yeah.
We're also the only Canadian team with Canadians. So
exactly. Yeah.
But I would say that he was pretty high on our priority, because I'll add into little things that most people don't think about. He had no buyout. So that helps him a lot.
Oh.
Yeah.
So when a player has no buyout, you don't have to, pay a large fee to another org for a player. Then actually it's very favorable for that player, because, he can demand more, or he knows that he's, desirable to a lot of teams because of it.
Yeah.
Now, I'll say that I don't know if we were Surefour's first pick, but when we were negotiating with him, we were constantly told that, we were, the first team that he was on his list of choices. But, at the same time, our DPS players, so we decided to keep Mangachu and Logix from last season. Now, mainly because what people keep thinking is that Surefour and Logix are doubling up. And that it is certainly true in some situations, that they're both very good at hit scan. The thing with Surefour is that he's also very good at flex DPS.
Interesting.
And there's so
Hanzo is what you just I didn't know
he can play everything.
Interesting. So, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So a lot of people assume he's a hit scan player, because I guess some real players. But historically, Surefour has always been able to play every character in the game, almost DPS flex. He played. When he was on Google Meet, he played Genji all the time when it was dive meta. Yeah. He's very good on playing Pharah. in Goats he was an excellent Brigitte player, but
Yeah.
you know, he can pretty much play like every DPS role. So there's a lot of chances definitely that, you know, we can play Logix and Surefoot together.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you know, one of the interesting things is that when I was negotiating for Kariv, the
Yeah.
option came up to get both agilities and Kariv. Now initially we hadn't been looking at it like agilities per se.
Mhm.
We only wanted Kariv at first, but
Mhm.
there was nothing against us going for agilities if they were a package deal.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
so when the package deal came up, I was like, sure, I'll take the package deal because it was a lot less than the bids that were going for Kariv by himself.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was actually what I was gonna get into. Is I saw the Gamer House report that was sort of like people were bidding for Kariv of like you don't have to get the specifics of the numbers. The report was like upward of like $300,000, and then you were able to come in there and get a package deal of Kariv and Agilities. And again, Agilities has shown glimpses of being a really, really good player, and he's only 19 years old, and he's Canadian. So I'm like, I think overall that was a great signing. And then because you're able to get the package deal, it was actually able to get both players noticeably cheaper than what some teams were bidding for just Kariv.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna go into specific
Yeah,
details.
for sure.
What? Yeah, but I will say though that the numbers for Kariv by himself were quite high.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the number you stated was pretty close or
Yeah.
higher than that. So the fact that we could get both for much lower,
Yeah.
like nearly a third of the price, it was kind of a no-brainer for me.
No, that's a great. Like I was gonna say, great job as a GM. Like I think I tweeted out like that's an amazing move.
So Valiant themselves took into account that they wanted to find a home for both players.
Yeah.
It wasn't so much about getting the single best deal for them. It was they wanted to have a good deal. They wanted to make money in their buyouts, but at the same time, if they could do both, you know, find a home for both their players and make some money off it, it was a much better like choice for them.
Yeah.
You know? So
that's awesome. I don't even. Yeah, that's the definition of a win-win sort of situation, I think.
Yeah. Now Kariv was actually my first choice. Yes, he was definitely my first choice for flex support.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well,
And then
congratulations.
at the end we rounded out with our main support, which was Calyx. There was I would say Calyx pretty high on the list of main supports we looked at, because we knew that he could be very successful with season 1. You know, they had,
exactly.
You know, that's when Boston had that fantastic
Undefeated,
roster going for them. Yeah. And Calyx was a very strong point of that roster. Like, you know, what people see on stage, obviously, is they never see intangibles about a player.
Yeah.
Calyx is an excellent in-game like caller. You know, his mechanics are very good. He also knows how to do one of those things that main supports are always supposed to do, is ult track. Not, you know, so you know, ult tracking is a very big deal, and he's very good at it. Now, we also got to see some of his like leadership and calling, you know, on how they did during the World Cup too. So obviously, you know, he had
a really good performance at the World Cup. Yeah.
Yeah.
Intangibles. That's why I keep on telling Spencer when I get don't get gold damage, and he's like, Chris, why don't you play better? I'm like, it's intangibles, man. I'm making space, right?
Yeah, Chris, you're not ult tracking though. I guarantee you, Calyx is. Yeah.
I'm definitely not.
But no,
so we aim for players generally with a lot of history, or at least even if it's not history in the Overwatch League like Beast. You know, we aim for people with a lot of history that we also looked into their like what other teams thought of them. Like, so we talked to their old coaches. We talked to a lot of times the players that they used to play with and their opinion of these players. So, you know, it's not like we just sat down and just threw, you know, darts at a dartboard saying, hey, let's just take that guy. You know, obviously we put a lot of time into it because we also wanted to make a team that we knew could function well as a team and not just as co-workers. So that's the thing. I think that's a very big deal because if a team starts doing poorly at a certain point, you know, you want players on that team that are still willing to, keep that positivity going, that are always willing to listen to each other. And that's what we aim for with a lot of our players.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
far, campus showed us.
Oh, sorry, you're cutting out. You're cutting out a little bit. I need to
I'll
repeat
say
that.
so.
Yeah, sorry.
So far, yeah.
For those of you who don't know, he is currently in Korea. We're in Canada, so the distance is a little bit in terms of the ping. But yeah, sorry, continue.
Yeah. So far, it's everything that we had hoped in terms of players and their personalities has borne out throughout our boot camp.
Yeah, that's awesome. I would actually probably segues perfectly into our next sort of topic. Really is like obviously you guys are in Korea now doing the boot camp, and sort of like if you can give us a little bit of insight into one, like the meta that's being played, and then two, how you guys are performing, and maybe some of the other teams that are performing well as well.
So let's see. The team has been performing fairly well, especially considering they're a bunch of players that have never really played with each other.
Yeah, exactly. You're still building that chemistry. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So so the entire boot camp idea was for the team to build chemistry with each other and with their coaches. It was basically an introduction to each other before they all moved to Toronto. Now, and definitely that's what we've accomplished through this boot camp. Every day they've basically improved because they've started to develop that synergy. And that's what we wanted. Everyone's very positive. They're all very interactive with each other. Even when they get off work, because we have work hours obviously, but after hours, they all still, they're all still hang out together. Yeah. They get along very well. They all respect each other's opinions. They're always willing to listen to each other, and to the coaches. And I will say, this is probably some of the most interactive VOD reviews I've ever seen. So there's obviously coaching reviews that the coaches do with the team, and the players are very engaged. They all want to get better. They all want to see a lot of times after a scrim happens, players just go off, do whatever they want. They'll just tend to wander off, but with our boot camp, a scrim ends, and then a lot of times players will be looking at replay system just to see what happened in a scrim, or if they could do something better, and then other players go around them. It's actually very, it's great to see. If it comes to the meta is obviously still kind of
in flux.
In flux. Some of the metas you do see, depends on the comp. There's what we call, I guess, internally we call a rush comp. Then there's the more like a poke comp. Variations in Korea. Right now in our scrims, we might be the only team that really runs a Genji dive.
Interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing it. Hopefully that makes it.
Yeah, we're the only team running it really. Everyone else runs more of a Pharah style dive with Sombra, but it's not as common obviously as there's the poke comp, which is more like Orisa Sigma, Hanzo Mei.
Interesting, Hanzo Mei.
And poke away. Usually when you see Hanzo Mei, Baptiste is with it together. So Hanzo Mei, Baptiste, and then you'll get a whole bunch of variations of what the second
support is.
Yeah. So you'll see a lot of Anna, you'll see a lot of Zen, you'll see a lot of Lucio, and then in counter to dive, you'll see Brigitte. So it's it all depends, what support is going to be there. It depends on what they're playing against. Then there's the rush comp, which is Orisa and Rhine, with Reaper and Mei, Orisa, Rhine, Reaper, Mei, and usually with a Moira and a Lucio, because you can rush in with coalescence and speed and all this stuff, and then it's a bit more of an aggressive comp. There's different ways to play that, and obviously there's Pharah is very meta right now as well, but a lot of things are very map dependent. So.
For sure, yeah.
That's good to hear. I like that it's map dependent, meaning that you're not going to see a heck of a lot of consistency.
You never know once it gets figured out, but
you never know.
Ideally, it'd be map dependent. That'd be interesting. I would love to see the Genji dive run on stage once again. I assume It doesn't matter who's playing what, but yeah, that seems like really interesting. How has it been? Obviously, as a GM, I'm sure, and this is a little bit just something that popped in my head, but I mean, so much of your job is to build, like you said, main tank, off tank, flex support, main support. How much of a challenge is it when all of a sudden a patch comes out and you're finding yourself running Ryan Orisa? I mean, I know you got Nevix, who seems to be super flexible, which is just great to have, right? But yeah, how much of a challenge is that you have to overcome?
I mean, as long as you aim for players that are flexible, right?
Yeah.
That's what you try to do. You know, we got Nevix, who can play a ton of characters. We have Beast Halo, Beast, who's very good at a lot of like just tanks in general, and he can play a lot, like he can play pretty much every single tank, main tank very well. And then we have a fairly large DPS lineup, so that helps with our flexibility and figuring out DPS. And luckily, both our support players are mechanically talented and can swap on to a lot of pretty much every type of support combo we need, like without really feeling any detriment to us. So people have to remember, like, Kariv wasn't always a support player. You know, he's played DPS roles.
I don't think Kariv was the concern, right? I think some people would have been concerned about, could Kelix be the one to flex over from like that main support role to?
Oh yeah. So he'll play a lot of BAP.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of main supports play BAP, but you know, he can play So he can play pretty much. Like when there's Ana Zen, he'll play the Ana generally, while Kariv will play the Zen.
Really interesting. I thought you'd want Kariv on that, signature Ana, but I guess that makes sense because his Zen's really good too.
Yeah. But it all depends on if someone has to like switch and who's switching first. They'll just be like, switching characters first.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that seems like Toronto's really kind of made the shift from what would seem like is a more like rigid player base, that have like certain things that they're good at, to a lot more of a flexible player base, which almost insulates you from any things that could happen like they did happen in our first inaugural season.
Yeah, I mean, there's some teams right now, I guess like for our first 3 weeks, we as a team, we've tried so many different comps.
Yeah.
And also different setups with different DPS players. And we also have Roki play too, because we want to keep him active.
Yeah, I was actually.
Even though he's going to be a 2-it.
Yeah, we had a question here about sort of why you decided to keep. Why was Roki the only remaining player from the Defiant? But it's nice to see that he's getting some playtime.
Well, he plays 1 hour block every day, so he gets to play 1 hour a day. So we want to keep him like fresh. Because the thing is, we don't care if we lost every scrim at the boot camp, as long as the players got better and they developed synergy with each other.
Yeah, exactly.
So we made sure that everyone got play time.
Mm-hmm.
We just didn't matter who we were playing. We just made sure the entire team and all the players here got to feel involved and got to feel a part of the team. So
smart.
That was a big deal for us. And I will say though, some teams have chosen to play one comp nonstop, just because they feel like that's the meta, and they'll get it. Just work on it now. It all depends on what your coaching philosophy, I guess, is as a team. Because the thing is, if you play one comp and one comp only, right, or variations that one comp, you'll get very good at that.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's best in the long run. It's more of short-term gains and then long-term gains. Obviously, you can play one comp constantly and use that to try to develop synergy, because you guys get better at that one comp. You're going to get better at that synergy behind there, and that's going to be one of the side effects of it, developing that synergy, because you're getting so good at that one comp. And then after that, you can start branching out to different comps. But I think, because of how fast and furious the Overwatch League seasons are generally, I think it's better to, get them to be as varied and, multifaceted as possible as a team, to being able to play on other comps, so that if metas do change constantly, that they're already ready for it. It's a longer gain, and it takes a lot longer to get there to develop synergy when you're trying out all these different things. But I feel like it creates a better team in the long run.
No, for sure. I totally agree.
Yeah, that makes sense as well. You're not putting all your eggs in one basket, essentially.
So what sort of teams have you thought maybe stood out to you just recently in the boot camp, regardless of whether or not they're playing one comp or not.
Well, we play Shock a lot, and they're very good. So.
Spoiler: the Shocker is still really good. Yeah.
Are you losing every
Yeah,
scrim? Maybe.
Maybe.
So we play Shock a lot. They're still
Yeah.
the world champions for a reason.
For a reason.
Yeah, it's very interesting playing the world champions when you're a team that's learning synergy.
Yeah.
But it's still it's still fun.
Yeah, you still get good valuable lessons out of it, right?
Yeah.
Like for
Trial
sure.
by fire, am I right? Like,
Yeah.
The players learn a lot from it. Shock does not play one comp. They do try a lot of different things, and that's something that people should have expected because that's what they did during the season. They would try out different things sometimes. They were always pretty willing to think outside the box. And they still are.
That makes sense.
Other team-wise, let's see. Well, on live patch, not PTR patch, Shanghai was very good.
Yeah.
But, we'll have to see how fast they develop to the next. Clearly, they did prepare a lot for that exhibition match with the other Chinese teams.
Yeah.
They were very good at it. I would say, we've faced maybe 6 or 7 Overwatch League teams.
Mm-hmm.
And for a team that is just starting out, I would say we're right in the middle.
Yeah.
So I would say that's very promising.
Yeah, exactly. Because like you said, there's some teams that have a core group of people together and also aren't, like you said, trying out two-way players and people on the bench. So I think there's definitely some positives to sort of take away from that. And build around.
Exactly. So just moving on to, I guess, more forward-looking stuff now. So we do have, I believe that Toronto Defiant's full roster hasn't been filled yet. Now, do you have any plans at looking at any more players, to sign any more players?
In terms of the 12-man slot, yeah.
Yes, 12-man slot. Or you think you're going to stick with what you got?
So there's this weird misconception.
Mm-hmm.
Overwatch Reddit community maybe that that a lot of teams are going for a 12-man. There's 4 teams that are doing it. The other 16 teams are not. So
No, we just asked. The goal is we have one extra player signed, and he is boom.
Yeah. So there's very few teams that are actually doing a 12-man
roster,
and that's not a thing.
Mm-hmm.
The logistics. The more people you add on, the logistics add on. Constantly. So
for sure.
Yeah, and that's what I thought.
Now,
I mean, he's not going to be at the camp.
Yeah, so there's teams that look like they have large rosters because they had people on contract
but
they
from
couldn't get rid of. Yeah. So that doesn't mean they're going for a 12-man just because they have people they can't get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
No, I know what you mean.
So the thing is with us is that if we see during the season that we need to make a change or add someone, then we will at that point. But the players are all very, nobody has been lacking energy. Everyone's very hyped for the season. They're just hyped to, once the boot camp is over, to be in Toronto and to actually start real scrimming. This is more of a taste test sort of kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Just for the players to get used to each other and just to start developing those friendships and connections with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will say though that we haven't made it official yet, but we are staying in contenders. We will keep our academy team.
Yeah.
Nice.
So we have a history. We are trying to make an academy team that we think have potential to be players that can always make it into the Overwatch League.
Yeah.
So, at the same time, we will continue to develop our academy team, so who knows, maybe during the season, if something happens, if a player gets really sick and we need to find a replacement for him, we do have our academy team to reach out to and all this. So.
And it's nice that you have flexibility. You're right. You wouldn't want to be stuck where, okay, we want to make a change, but now we have a 12-man roster and we have someone, contract we can't get rid of, and then you can't call anybody up because you don't have that space available. So no, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Definitely does.
I mean, we do see a lot of teams getting rid of their academy team, and it's unfortunate. And I won't say it was easy to keep our academy team. Both me and Felix, Felix very much so. He had a very strong opinion that academy is very important for a team.
Yeah.
And I agreed with him. Obviously at the same time, as a GM, I have to look on both the competitive end and the business end.
Exactly.
And so, it's just one of those things that it was difficult, but in the end, we are able to keep it. I wish the tier 2 team was more developed,
For sure.
and had more support.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one of those things. It just sucks to see players with a lot of potential decide to retire early because they didn't make it into Overwatch League this year. It's just one of those things. And the thing is, a lot of players shouldn't feel disgruntled about it, because there was a lot of teams that just couldn't take players because they didn't have slots. Think about it. If you have,
for sure.
If you have a bunch of players that you're not going to use, but then you're stuck on long contracts with them, you have to wait another year or wait until whenever their contract runs up.
Exactly.
Because people forget that Overwatch League contracts are guaranteed. So.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I also think, like, and just in a very personal opinion, I think tier 2 is a little important. If you want to mimic traditional sports, you have your typical theater teams, like your in NHL, you have
AHL,
like your AHL teams. And I actually think that the Montreal Rebellion it's one of your unique contenders teams that's in a separate market than our parent team, which is good because then you're catering to a pretty big market in Montreal. It's not like a Boston contenders team that's still catering to the same market as their Owl team.
Yeah, again, you're saying Montreal caters to Montreal fans as well as Toronto fans because you cheer for your contenders team, so you get the best of both worlds.
I mean, technically, we could also have made a team like the Buffalo Bisons. It doesn't matter because upstate New York also belongs to Toronto. So
Exactly.
It could have been an Ottawa team for all we know.
Ooh, 2, 3 contenders team for Toronto. Wait, what?
Ottawa, I'm a Montreal Canadiens fan, so I'm all for the Montreal Bell. You know what I mean? I prefer being Montreal than being Ottawa, but that's just my opinion.
Now, what I will admit about this boot camp is that the players have very much surprised me because I think only 3 or 4 out of 40 meals has there been any junk food. It's pretty much been all the players eat very healthy. I think all of them go to the gym at least 2 to 3 times a week. Some go to the gym every day. So.
Yeah, that's good.
The team,
the healthy lifestyle, and obviously means they're motivated and willing to improve. That's a good sign.
I mean,
it's very funny too because you have this image of players just eating chips and drinks. There's very little chip eating. There's a lot of they eat a lot. They drink a lot of black coffee, which is actually pretty funny.
Same.
Way to go.
So, no, I feel like that's people just sitting there eat drinking Red Bull, and that's such a stereotype, right? That's maybe what you do when you're in university, but when you're at the top level, at the professional level, you got to keep your body functioning properly, right?
And you know what? Sorry.
Yeah, most of these guys drink a ton of water and
absolutely.
And black coffee. I think Short 4 goes through 2 liters of water a day or something like that.
Wow.
Constantly drinking. Yeah.
Stay hydrated, right?
That's it. That's how for everyone who wants to get out of Plat, right? If you're stuck in Elo Hell and you're Plat, just drink more water, man. I promise. If Short 4 does it, it works.
Honestly, it's so important to have the mind body connection. They affect each other so much. Mm-hmm. It's if you're in traditional sports, you want to be able to keep your mind sharp because it affects your body, and it can definitely go the other way. Your body, if I have a couple day streak where I eat trash, which has happened before, you get too busy, you just do it. It affects your mind totally.
100%. But yeah. So I'm glad things are going really good at the boot camp. I completely agree with the strategy, building that team chemistry first, giving everyone play time, and then before you start really sort of honing in and trying to figure out the meta. Super excited for 2020. We're just wondering, obviously the big change in the Overwatch League is the travel, right? This is the first year that they're doing home stands for every team. it's obviously going to be an adjustment for everyone in the league, regardless of your experience. I was wondering if there's any ways that Toronto Defiant specifically were trying to like put stuff in place to sort of combat like player burnout, or maybe what are some of the challenges that you see coming up in the future with that?
So a lot of player burnout isn't necessarily about travel or anything. It's a lot of has to do with team environment. Team environment is like the biggest key to burnout. Because if a player is unhappy,
Yeah.
in general on the team, that accelerates your burnout, right? Yeah, because if you're traveling and you enjoy the people that you're traveling with, and you're still having a good time, that mitigates a lot of the burnout too.
Yeah.
And so, that's why we did aim for a team where everyone just stays, just generally a positive and good-natured, roster. At the same time, my coaching staff, takes a very holistic approach to it. They want, so there's different types of coaching structures in Overwatch in general. There is more like a very heavy top-down approach where the coaching staff want their players to do this, and this all the time and not vary from it, right? And they basically are more about programming their players and, getting them to, do certain things at certain times at all the time and not to ever vary from that game plan. My coaching staff takes the complete opposite approach where they help them figure out strategies. They help the players, see where their mistakes are, where they could improve and where it could be better, and give them framework. But they want the players to think for themselves, because in the end, it's the players that are in the game, right? And if they have to think on the fly, then they have to think on the fly, because you never know what an opposing team might throw at you.
Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. It's almost like bad team writing is like catalyst to burnout. Never even thought of it that way.
Yeah. And so because the way that Felix and the coaches are, I think, approaching this, I think actually is healthier for a team in the long run. There is something to say about, a heavy top-down approach too, because, you do see some very good results when you do pre-program your players to do certain things at all times. But at the same time, I feel like those teams are a lot less flexible. But also, the stress, I think, is much greater because of, it's very more like, heavy-handed approach, while our approach is more like developing.
Yeah, there's also signs.
It's a very different approach than I would say was last season. Last season was very much a top-down, kind of bit of a heavy. I think that did attribute a lot.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I was saying there is something to speak about for coach burnout too, and I know if you're doing more of a decentralized model when it comes to coaching, that reduces the micromanaging that coaches have to do. I would think, at least from an outsider's perspective. Yeah. So it's not only beneficial for players, but also for coaches.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we wanted to touch on, one last thing, just like look at some of your expectations for the team in 2020. So in the coming season, what do you guys, where do you guys want to see your team, I guess, kind of placing, but also just in terms of like skill development, where do you want to see Toronto Defiant?
Identity too.
Yeah, identity, I guess.
I mean, that's hard to say, right? Like you can always, like, I don't like predicting, my team is going to be a top 10, top 5 team.
Yeah.
It's going to be like, just by nature of like how everybody is, the talent on the roster, we do expect to perform a lot better than we did our season 2. That's just kind of an expectation, and we feel like it's something that the team can do. Now, am I saying we're a championship contender? I think that's, you just jinx yourself if you say that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
A lot of things go right. We can have a conversation, right? There's a couple things that have to go right for it. But
that's something more like, we could talk about halfway in the season.
Yeah.
Not something to say like right at the end of your 3-week-long boot camp.
It was one really good boot camp. You know what I mean? It was a really.
But at the same time, we're also very excited for like the team to be in Toronto and everything. They all
Yeah.
It's a great setup we have for them. They'll be living in Toronto.
Mhm.
They'll be in a 5-minute walking distance of their practice facility.
Wow.
That's awesome.
You know, every player, we're just so like there's always a thing. Some people like team houses, some people like apartments.
Yeah.
We're doing the apartment approach for all our players, where
Awesome.
we split the players into 2-bedroom apartments, but everyone gets their own bedroom, everyone gets their
Yeah.
own bathroom. So we wanted that because we wanted to have that good work and life disconnect.
Completely
So that
agree.
once you're done with work, you're done. You go home like a normal person. You get to live your life. Basically. And enjoy yourself. You know, they get there's a gym in the building.
Mhm.
They get to do you know maintain their health and their well-being. The practice facility that OAM is setting up right now. So there's going to be two practice facilities. There's a temporary practice facility we're going to have,
Mhm.
and then by mid-season we're moving into our permanent practice facility. And both practice facilities are great right now. Call of Duty is in it right now because they're
Yeah.
doing their Call of Duty. The Ultra is doing their boot camp in Toronto,
Mhm.
and it's a great space. We'll be sharing the practice facility with the Call of Duty team. Not the same room, just practice facility. Like we're in separate rooms for scrimming. But and then when the permanent practice facility, it'll house not just the two teams, but it'll house all of Overactive Media. So
Oh,
it's going to
wow.
be it's a very large like building. So the entire like our parent company plus two teams are going to be there. And but everything is within walking distance of
Yeah.
like all the offices of where they live. And it's a great part of Toronto, and
No,
Toronto's a great city,
for
so
sure.
we're very excited.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I was gonna say I completely agree with that mentality of separating where you practice and where you play, and then like your home life balance, like you said. I think that's such a good way to approach it because I mean, I was never a part of a team house, but one of the things that I always assumed was a struggle was the fact that you never felt like it was turned off. You know what I mean? Like because you played and practiced where you lived, like you always sort of felt like you were in like practice mode and never really allowed people to just totally de-stress. I think that's a really good way to approach it.
And that like begets kind of like short term player mentality. And in the past, when esports wasn't as big, maybe that made sense because you don't know how long you're going to be able to last for and how much money you're going to be able to make.
Yeah.
When esports is becoming more and more of like a long-term prospect, that's when you need to start like shifting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Makes
And
total sense.
Yeah. So I was gonna say just before we let you go, there's one last thing I just wanted to ask about, just because there's a lot of rumors online and a lot of rumors in the Reddit community, and I don't know how much of this
Sure.
situation you can shine a light on it. If you can't, that's fine. But there's a couple rumors about the Defiant going after OG and Neptuno, and I was just wondering if you could shine a little bit of light on that situation, and sort of what your thought process was that, and then sort of the transition you made from Beast, Halo, and Calyx, obviously.
So we never. I mean, Neptuno was like on a list of main supports that we considered,
Mm-hmm.
Western main supports to look at.
Yeah.
He was never like our
Number one choice.
pick.
Yeah.
It was more like we he was. We looked at different players, how they played on their original teams and their playstyle. I think there's this weird rumor that went out that we thought that he was toxic or something. That was
Yeah, that's just one of you could shine. Yeah.
yeah, that was never a thing. Now with OGE, there was possibility. Like we did, look at OGE very strongly because
Mm-hmm.
he is not only is he a Korean main tank, he's a Korean main tank that functions. So he's very similar to Kariv, that functions very well on a mixed roster.
Yeah.
And he definitely was one of the people that we had looked at originally.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of those things that if you're looking at a player, but then somebody just offers
Decay.
give you decay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're sort of like, oh, okay.
The thing is, I'm not saying that we didn't look at him, but we definitely weren't the only team looking at him. There were like plenty of teams looking at OGE, but then Gladiators had Decay. So
yeah, no, for sure.
all the teams are looking and they're talking to each other, but then David had to come in and throw Decay on the table, so
Yeah.
everyone else was like,
there it is.
Sorry.
there it is.
Yeah.
So
No, I'm glad you cleared up with the Neptuno stuff too, because that was something that always never really made sense to me, and I'm glad that was sort of like cleared up there. Because it would have been nice to see OG obviously, but I'm super excited about Beast Halo. Obviously, 19 years old, ton of experience, and Decay's Decay. There's not much you can do there.
Yeah, I think
Exactly.
for Fuel, it was very important that they, I guess, shore up some of those points they felt that they needed help in, and I think Decay is such a talented player that it could help them very much so. I respect you. Their GM is great. I love Matt. He's a great guy. So I think that they will definitely be better.
Yeah, for sure.
But obviously, we haven't scrimmed them. We have no idea. So
on paper they look better. On paper, everyone.
Yes. On paper, they definitely do look much stronger. So I'm expecting a lot more, just out of that team, just in terms of at least excitement too.
No, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm so annoyed that it's only December because I cannot wait for the next Overwatch League season. There's a lot of teams that did a lot of interesting stuff this offseason. I can't wait to see how that pans out. I mean, obviously Toronto's number one, always will be, but yeah, there's a couple teams I'm gonna have my eye on. But I
would hope that people are fans of the league in general.
Yeah.
Obviously you can have your favorite teams, but it's great to just be fans of the league in general.
Oh, for sure.
Are you guys coming to the homestead?
Oh yeah. We have it. Yeah. We're part of the C9 section with Alpha Flight in the crew. Yeah.
Are we coming? I remember the homestead tickets come out. I immediately had the thing on tab. I was like, I had the link ready to go, and I immediately bought a ticket.
Yeah,
I was I'm so excited for this.
I can't wait. I can't wait for the season opener. I can't wait for the homestands. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be super, super exciting.
Mostly just meeting the players. The one thing is that when you guys are located in the US, I want to meet them, see them, and you just don't have the opportunity. There was the opportunity with the tennis team, but I just wasn't in town then. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I can't do that then. Oops.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's nice that they're gonna be, and you can just help. It's gonna be nice for players to get the opportunity to go to an esports event live, and just sort of how that you can help build your fan base in that respect too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, did your excitement for the homesteads increase as you kept hearing additions to the roster?
So personally, obviously, Chris and I, we do a podcast based on the Toronto Defiant. I'm what we would consider hardcore fan, so I was going regardless. I bought tickets before the roster was announced. But yeah, absolutely. Am I excited that I get to go out there and watch, players who I've followed in the scene for a long time? 100%. When I first heard the Nevix rumors, because I tweeted out as soon as he was released, I was like, at Toronto Defiant. I cannot wait to see him play for Toronto Defiant and Surefour, obviously. Yeah. And the whole team is super exciting. So yeah,
for me, it definitely increased as well. I'd say I just love the fact that we have a lot of Canadians on the team. I don't know. It's just I like Toronto Defiant because they're in Toronto. I like Toronto Defiant because they have Canadians on the team. It's just
I would say we are probably one of the most diverse teams. We have an American, we have Beast, we have 3 Canadians, we have 3 Europeans, and we have 2 Koreans. So we are all over the place.
Exactly.
And we have a 4 European coaching squad.
Yeah.
3 Frenchmen and a German. So,
exactly.
And then you have
Frenchmen.
And you have a Korean American GM, so it's pretty diverse, as a team.
Oh yeah, no.
Classic, just like Canada's.
Yeah.
Different.
Yeah, I will say that it was pretty entertaining to see the memes about fans, saying, we've been suffering for so long, and
exactly. Oh no, again, we covered the Defiant all last year, so it was nice to be like, okay, awesome, there's some new juice and excitement injected into this team, because obviously it ended on a disappointing note, and no, I think I was telling Chris in an episode, I was like, man, Jay's got a lot on his plate, because some teams just had to get better. You know what I mean? They had the fan base and they just had to get better. But like you said, you got to worry about the player personnel, but you also have to worry about the business. So I think part of your job this offseason was to be the best team that you can be. And it was also probably to help build, the brand and the identity of Toronto Defiant. And I think you did a fantastic job at doing both of those things. I generally mean that.
Yeah, I think people will be excited for the roster.
Yeah.
Well, they are. I know they are excited. I think quite possibly we might have one of the most like big, like I guess fan service rosters you could possibly get.
But they're
for,
good. That's the best part, right? Like they're also really talented. Because it's not. I mean, I know the meme right now is just like, hey, just go out there and sign Kefri, like just go get Chipsa. But everyone you got, like, yes, they have a fan base, and obviously part of it you could argue is fan service, but all of them are talented. All of them have potential. So I think you did a really good job at having that good balance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, I mean the rosters. You guys think you guys will be excited for?
I can't wait.
Oh, I can't wait. But anyway, I just want to thank you for coming onto our podcast and chatting with us, shedding some light onto Toronto Defiant and kind of what they're like in the future. So thank you very much.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Yeah, and if there's anything else you want to, I mean, again, like we can put the homestand tickets in the description below. Like anything else you want to say, sort of before you head out.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. If you haven't gotten your homestead tickets,
Go get them.
For sure.
Definitely. I know they're nearing capacity, so it's probably better to do it before they're all gone.
Well, I would argue definitely better before they're all gone.
Yeah,
yes, you don't want to miss out. Like,
yeah.
Especially if you're just, especially if you're from,
Toronto.
Eastern Canada, I guess, or just
Eastern
in general,
Canada,
and you're a big Overwatch fan, you don't have to leave the country, the home,
Yeah.
And I'll say that you'll get to see all your favorite players, not just from
Exactly right, because
other Defiant, but then especially people that are fans of the Canadian World Cup team in general too, so, because we do have Canadians. So but we also have great just people that are just beloved across the Overwatch League, players like Kariv and Nevix and all, and Kelix. So I think it'll be a good time.
I think it's gonna be a great time. We have a guy who play Overwatch with sometimes in Buffalo, and he's like, "Man, I'm coming down to watch. I'm coming down to watch the Defiant play. I'm going to the homestand."
Buffalo is in the Toronto Defiance
exactly.
That's our market too.
Exactly.
Get over here, El Cope.
but yeah, but thanks a lot so much for coming on, and yeah, if that's all, then so for everyone who enjoyed this, for sure, like leave a like, comment, and we'll be back probably next week with another video. But yeah, I'm good if you guys are.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Yeah.
All right. Bye.
Hey, we're good.